Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. I am your host, Mark, and sitting right across from me, as always, is my fantastic co-host, Jamie. How are you doing today, Jamie?
Hey, Mark, I'm doing really well today. I've got my coffee, I'm totally settled in, and I'm incredibly excited about what we are talking about. It's a topic that literally every single human being on Earth struggles with at some point.
It really is. Today, we are tackling the big one. We are talking about motivation, or maybe more accurately, the complete and total lack of motivation.
Yes, that heavy, sluggish, terrible feeling when you wake up and you look at your to-do list and your brain just says, absolutely not. Not today. I'm going back to bed.
Exactly. And I think especially for our listeners who are actively studying English or trying to learn any difficult long-term skill, motivation is the single biggest hurdle. You buy the shiny new textbooks, you download all the expensive apps, you tell yourself, this is it. This is the year I finally become fluent, and for the first week you're totally on fire. You're studying for 2 hours a day. You feel like a genius.
Oh, the first week is always amazing. You feel completely unstoppable. The excitement carries you.
Right. But then week 2 arrives, or week 3, and it's raining outside and you had a really long day at work. Your boss yelled at you, the traffic was terrible, and suddenly opening that English textbook feels like trying to lift a car with your bare hands. The motivation is just completely gone. It evaporated.
It vanishes into thin air. And when it vanishes, we usually tell ourselves a very specific and very dangerous lie. We sit on the couch and we say, well, I just don't feel motivated today. I don't have the energy, so I will just wait until tomorrow. I will wait until the motivation magically comes back.
Yes, that is exactly what we all do. We treat motivation like it's the weather, like it's just this magical invisible cloud that floats into our room and strikes us with lightning. Oh, the motivation cloud is here. I guess I can study now.
Right? We think motivation leads to action. We believe that if I feel good and I feel inspired, then I will do the work. But neurologically and psychologically, that is completely backward. That is what I like to call the motivation myth.
The motivation myth. Okay, I love a good myth-busting session. Break that down for us. If motivation doesn't lead to action, what actually does?
Action leads to motivation. It is a continuous loop, not a straight line. Think about basic physics. Think about Isaac Newton's first law of motion. Every kid learns this in school. An object at rest stays at rest, but an object in motion stays in motion.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we are applying physics to human behavior. I like where this is going.
It's totally true. When you're sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, scrolling through your phone, you are an object at rest. Your brain is perfectly content. It is not producing any of the neurochemicals required to do hard, focused work. So if you just sit there and wait to suddenly feel a massive burst of energy to study grammar, you're going to be waiting forever.
Because you are at rest. And the physics say you will stay at rest.
Exactly. To get the motivation, you actually have to start doing the thing while you're completely unmotivated. You have to force the object, which is you, into motion. And usually, after about 5 or 10 minutes of doing the task, the motivation magically appears.
That is so incredibly true. I notice this all the time when I try to go for a run in the morning. The hardest part of the run is never the actual running. The hardest part is putting on my shoes.
Putting on the shoes is the hardest part of the entire workout.
It really is. I will sit on the edge of my bed staring at my running shoes, just bargaining with myself for 20 minutes. I'll say, well, it looks a little cloudy, maybe it will rain, maybe my ankle hurts a little bit, but the moment I actually tie the laces, walk out the door and start jogging, I feel great. The motivation arrives 10 minutes after the workout starts.
Exactly. And there's actually a concept in chemistry that explains this perfectly too. It's called activation energy.
Activation energy. Okay, what is that?
So in chemistry, if you want to start a fire, the wood doesn't just spontaneously burst into flames. You have to strike a match. You have to apply a tiny bit of initial heat to start the chemical reaction. That initial heat is the activation energy. Once the fire is burning, it sustains itself. It creates its own heat, but you have to force it to start.
Oh, that is a brilliant analogy. So, when we are looking at our textbooks or our work projects and feeling totally lazy, we are just logs of wood waiting to catch fire. We have to provide our own activation energy.
Yes, and the same exact rule applies to studying a language or writing a script or working on any creative project. The friction is always highest at the very beginning, so you have to find a way to trick your brain to get past that massive initial friction.
So, how do we do that? How do we trick ourselves into providing that activation energy when we feel absolutely zero desire to do it, when the couch is just so comfortable?
You have to make the barrier to entry so ridiculously low that your brain cannot possibly say no. I like to call this the 5-minute rule, or some people call it the micro commitment.
The 5-minute rule. Okay. Walk us through exactly how that works in real time.
So let's say your big goal for the evening is to study English vocabulary for an hour, but you're exhausted, you just finished dinner, and the idea of a full hour of studying makes you want to cry. Your brain is screaming, no way.
Right? The activation energy required for an hour is just too high.
Exactly. So instead of fighting that feeling, you negotiate, you make a deal with yourself. You say, okay, brain, I hear you. We are tired. So I'm only going to study for exactly 5 minutes. I'm just going to read one single paragraph of this article. And after 5 minutes, if I still want to quit, I have full, complete permission to close the book and go watch TV. No guilt.
And does the brain actually accept that deal? It sounds almost like you're lying to yourself.
It does, almost always. Because 5 minutes is nothing. The brain looks at that deal and says, fine, I can suffer for 5 minutes. That's just a commercial break. But here is the absolute magic of the 5-minute rule. Once you open the book, once you sit down at the desk and read that first paragraph, you have provided the activation energy. You are now an object in motion.
Ah, the physics kicks in. The fire starts.
Exactly. You have overcome the initial friction, and 90% of the time when that 5-minute timer finally goes off, you say to yourself, well, I'm already sitting here. I already have the book open. My brain is already focused. I might as well keep going for another 10 minutes.
You manufactured the motivation by taking the tiny action first.
Precisely. You didn't wait for the spark. You struck the match yourself.
I absolutely love that. And it is so practical. But, Jamie, let's push a little deeper here because sometimes even the 5-minute rule feels like too much work. Sometimes the friction in our lives is just incredibly high because we are relying entirely on our own willpower.
Oh yeah, willpower is a terrible, terrible long-term strategy.
Why is that? We always hear people say, oh, you just need more willpower. You just need more discipline.
Because willpower is a finite resource. Think of it like the battery on your smartphone. You wake up in the morning after a good night's sleep, and your willpower battery is at 100%. You feel like you can conquer the world. But every single decision you make throughout the day drains that battery just a little bit.
Right. It's not just the big decisions either. It's everything.
Everything, what should I eat for breakfast? The battery drains a little. Which shirt should I wear today? The battery drains. How do I politely reply to this annoying email from my boss? Massive battery drain, navigating traffic on the way home, huge drain.
Wow. It's a phenomenon called decision fatigue, right?
Exactly. Decision fatigue by the time 6 p.m. rolls around and you finally have free time to sit down and study your English. Your willpower battery is sitting at 1%. You have absolutely nothing left in the tank.
So, if we can't rely on the magical motivation cloud, and we can't rely on our willpower battery because it dies by the evening, what is left? How do highly successful people consistently do the hard things day after day?
They don't use willpower. They rely on systems. They design their physical environment so that the good habit is the easiest possible thing to do, and the bad habit is incredibly difficult.
Environment design. Okay, give me a practical, real-world example of this.
Okay, let's look at the ultimate villain of productivity. Your smartphone, your phone is a motivation killer. It is engineered by thousands of geniuses to hijack your attention. If you sit down at your desk to study and your phone is sitting right next to your textbook, you're forcing yourself to use your precious willpower every single second of that study session.
Right? Because it's just sitting there staring at you, glowing, tempting you to check your notifications.
Yes, and eventually your willpower battery will die and you will grab the phone. So, environment design means changing the physical space before the battle even begins. Before you even sit down to study, you take your phone, you put it on silent, and you physically walk it into a completely different room.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. And there's a brilliant concept related to this called the 20-second rule, popularized by a psychologist named Sean Achor. He says that if you want to break a bad habit, you just have to add 20 seconds of physical friction to the process.
20 seconds, that's it?
That's it. If your phone is in the other room and you suddenly feel the urge to check social media, your brain realizes it has to stand up, walk all the way down the hall, go into the bedroom and dig the phone out of a drawer. That takes about 20 seconds. And most of the time, the lazy part of your brain will say, "Ugh, that's too much work. Never mind, I'll just keep studying."
That is incredible. You are using your brain's natural laziness to your advantage.
Precisely. And you can do the exact opposite for the good habits, right? You can remove the friction.
Oh, okay. So, making the good habit take less than 20 seconds to start.
100%. If you want to practice your English speaking skills in the morning before work, don't hide your notebook in a drawer underneath a pile of mail. Don't make yourself search for a pen before you go to sleep at night. Put your notebook open to the right page, directly on top of your laptop keyboard, or right next to the coffee maker.
Make it so that you literally have to physically touch the study materials the moment you wake up.
Yes. You're basically building a world where doing the right thing happens on autopilot. You don't have to decide to do it because the system does it for you. You stumble into the kitchen, you pour the coffee, the book is open, and you just start reading. Zero willpower required.
That is such a massive paradigm shift. Motivation is a feeling. Systems are a reality. Feelings change every 5 minutes, but systems stay the same.
That's it. Feelings are temporary, systems are permanent.
But, Jamie, I want to pivot a little bit and talk about the deeper, maybe darker psychological side of this. Because I think a lot of times our lack of motivation isn't actually laziness. It's not a lack of systems. It's actually disguised fear.
Oh, absolutely. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of not being good enough, and the biggest one of all, perfectionism.
Yes, perfectionism is a huge motivation killer. I hear this from language learners constantly. They say, "Mark, I know all the grammar, I know the vocabulary, but I don't want to speak to a native speaker until I sound perfectly fluent, until I have zero accent." So they just never speak. They lose all motivation to practice because the gap between where they are right now and perfect fluency is just too massive to cross.
Wow. There's a famous quote, I think it's from a writer, but it goes, "Perfectionism is just procrastination wearing a really nice suit."
Oh, that is a brilliant quote. Procrastination wearing a nice suit.
It's so true. You tell yourself you're just having high standards. You tell yourself you're dedicated to quality, but really deep down, you're terrified of making a mistake and looking foolish. And when you demand absolute perfection from yourself every single day, of course you aren't going to be motivated because you're setting a goal that is mathematically impossible. You're setting yourself up to fail before you even start.
It's exhausting. If every time I sit down to write a script for a video, I tell myself, "Mark, this has to be a flawless viral masterpiece. I'm going to stare at a blank page for 3 hours and then go take a nap. The pressure is too heavy."
Exactly. The pressure paralyzes you. So how do we defeat perfectionism? We have to drastically change our internal measuring stick. We have to stop measuring ourselves against the ideal perfect outcome. Instead, we measure ourselves against yesterday.
The concept of 1% better.
Yes. Continuous tiny improvements. When you finish a study session, you don't ask yourself, "Am I fluent yet?" You ask yourself, "Did I learn one new word today?" Yes, then I won. It doesn't matter if I stumbled over my pronunciation. It doesn't matter if I completely forgot a basic grammar rule and sounded a bit silly. I am 1% better than I was 24 hours ago.
I think that completely changes the internal chemistry of motivation, because when you intentionally lower the bar for success, you actually start winning more often, and winning feels really good.
And what happens in your brain when you feel good? Your brain releases dopamine, and dopamine, contrary to what a lot of people think, is not just the pleasure chemical, it is the actual chemical of motivation. It is the molecule of craving and reward.
Right. So we are back to the loop we talked about at the beginning. You take a small, highly imperfect action, you don't judge it, you just do it. You celebrate the tiny win. Your brain releases a hit of dopamine, and that dopamine gives you the energy and the craving to take the next action tomorrow.
Yes, the momentum builds, you create an upward spiral instead of a downward spiral. Now, there is one more piece to this motivation puzzle that I think is absolutely critical, and it has to do with our identity, how we fundamentally view ourselves.
Identity. Okay, let's explore that. That sounds deep.
Well, it's a concept made very popular by James Clear in his book Atomic Habits. Most people set goals based entirely on outcomes. They say, I want to lose 20 pounds, or I want to pass the TOEFL English exam, or I want to get a promotion. Those are outcome-based goals, and they are fine for setting a general direction, but they don't really drive deep, long-lasting motivation.
Because once you hit the goal, the motivation completely disappears, right? You pass the test, you get the certificate, and then you literally never open an English book ever again.
Exactly. You see it all the time. True unbreakable motivation comes from identity-based habits. You don't say, I'm trying to pass an English test. You change your vocabulary. You say, I'm the type of person who learns every single day. I am a lifelong learner. I'm a polyglot in training.
Oh, wow. That is a very subtle shift in language, but it creates a massive shift in mindset.
It changes everything, because if your core identity is I'm a learner, then every single time you sit down to study, even if it's just for 5 minutes using the 5-minute rule, you're proving to yourself that your identity is true. You're casting a vote for the type of person you want to be.
It makes the action deeply personal. It's no longer a chore you have to do to get a piece of paper. It's just an expression of who you are.
Exactly. Think about fitness. If you deeply identify as a runner, you don't need a motivational YouTube video to convince you to go for a run on a Tuesday morning. You just go, because it's what runners do. If you identify as a dedicated language learner, opening your textbook isn't a massive, painful hurdle. It's just part of your daily rhythm. It's your lifestyle.
This is so fascinating, Jamie. We've talked about the physics of motion, we've talked about friction and systems, we've talked about dopamine loops and identity, but I want to ask a very grounded, realistic question.
Hit me.
Because no matter how brilliant your systems are, and no matter how strong your identity is, and no matter how many books you read, you're going to have bad days. Life happens.
Oh, of course. We are messy human beings, not perfectly programmed AI robots. Things go wrong.
Right, so what happens when you completely drop the ball? Let's say you get sick, or you have a family emergency and you skip 4 days of studying. You eat junk food, you spend 6 hours scrolling on social media. The beautiful momentum you built is completely broken. How do you get the motivation back without spiraling into a deep, dark pit of guilt and self-hatred?
That is arguably the most important question of this entire episode, because the guilt spiral is where most people actually quit for good. They mess up once or twice and they look at their broken streak and they say, well, I ruined it. I guess I don't have what it takes. I'm a failure. I might as well just give up entirely and go back to my old habits.
The classic all or nothing mindset. If it's not perfect, it's garbage.
Right? The all or nothing mindset is a trap. To beat that trap, you have to practice something called radical self-compassion. And I know the term self-compassion sounds a little bit fluffy, maybe a little too touchy-feely for some people, but it's actually a highly tactical psychological strategy.
Tactical self-compassion. Okay, explain how that works in practice.
When you mess up, beating yourself up emotionally drains your energy. It floods your brain with stress hormones, and it drains your willpower battery even faster. If you want to get back on track quickly, you have to forgive yourself immediately. You have to look in the mirror and say, okay, I skipped 4 days of studying. That happened. It is a fact, but it's in the past. It doesn't mean I'm a lazy failure. It just means I had a bad week.
You completely detach your core self-worth from the temporary mistake.
Exactly. You separate the action from the identity. And then once you have forgiven yourself, you apply the golden rule of habit tracking. And this is a rule everyone should write down on a sticky note and put on their monitor. Never miss twice.
Never miss twice. I like the sound of that.
It's incredibly powerful. Missing one day of your habit is just an accident. It's a blip on the radar, but missing 2 days in a row, that is the start of a new bad habit. So if you drop the ball on a Tuesday, your only goal in the entire universe is to make sure you pick it back up on Wednesday.
Even if you only do it for 5 minutes.
Especially if you only do it for 5 minutes. Even if it is the worst, lowest quality, most distracted study session of your entire life, you just have to protect the routine.
Because maintaining the identity of someone who shows up is significantly more important than the actual work you do on that specific day.
100% showing up on a bad day. When you feel terrible and unmotivated is worth 10 times more than showing up on a good day when the motivation is high. It proves your resilience. It proves that your systems work even when your feelings don't.
Wow. That is such a profound way to look at it. Showing up on the bad days is where the real growth happens.
Yeah, there is a concept called the plateau of latent potential. When you start building these systems and you start putting in the 5 minutes a day, you expect your progress to look like a straight line going up. You think if I study every day, I will get noticeably better every day.
But it never actually works like that, does it?
Never real progress is flat for a very long time. You put in the work, you force the activation energy, and for weeks or even months, nothing seems to happen. You don't feel any closer to fluency. This flat period is called the Valley of Disappointment.
The Valley of Disappointment. That sounds like a terrible place to be.
It is. And this is exactly where the people relying on the motivation myth quit because they aren't seeing immediate results. The dopamine dries up and they stop. But the people who rely on systems, the people who use the 5-minute rule and never miss twice, they keep walking through the valley.
Because their identity keeps them walking.
Yes, and eventually they cross the plateau. All that stored latent potential suddenly clicks. The vocabulary words they studied 3 weeks ago suddenly make sense in a sentence. The grammar rules connect, and their progress shoots up like a rocket. But you only get that rocket ship growth if you survive the valley of disappointment by relying on your systems.
Jamie, this has been an absolute masterclass today. I feel like we just completely dismantled the entire cultural concept of motivation, broke it down into pieces, and rebuilt it into something actually useful and scientific.
It really is a game changer once you stop waiting for the magical feeling to arrive and start engineering the actions to create the feeling yourself.
Let's do a quick, comprehensive recap for everyone listening right now, just to lock all of these concepts into our brains before we sign off. First, we talked about the motivation myth. Motivation does not cause action. Action causes motivation. You have to be an object in motion. You have to provide your own activation energy.
Yes. And second, use the 5-minute rule to overcome that initial heavy friction. Just commit to 5 minutes of work and give yourself full permission to quit after. You rarely will.
Third, do not rely on your willpower battery, because decision fatigue will drain it by the afternoon. Instead, design your environment. Add 20 seconds of friction to the bad habits, like putting your phone in another room, and remove all friction from the good habits by setting up your workspace the night before.
Fourth, drop the perfectionism. Stop measuring yourself against an impossible ideal. Aim to be just 1% better than yesterday. Chase the small dopamine hits that come from tiny wins.
Fifth, build an identity, not just an outcome-based goal. Tell yourself, I am a lifelong learner. Cast votes for that identity every day.
And finally, when life happens and you fail, practice tactical self-compassion. Forgive yourself instantly so you don't drain your energy with guilt. And remember the golden rule, never miss twice.
That is the ultimate bulletproof blueprint for getting things done and actually achieving those long-term goals.
It really is. It takes practice, but it changes everything.
Well, Jamie, thank you so much for bringing all of this incredible, actionable insight to the table today. I know I'm personally going to be looking at my own to-do list and my own habits very differently tomorrow morning. I'm definitely moving my phone out of my office.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark. It is always an absolute pleasure to dive deep into these psychological topics with you.
And to all of our amazing listeners out there, whatever it is you're putting off today, whatever textbook is gathering dust on your desk, don't wait until you feel like doing it, because that feeling might never come.
Just start. Give it 5 minutes. Be an object in motion.
We believe in you. You have the systems. You've got this. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Keep showing up, keep taking action, and we will see you right back here next time on the podcast. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye. Keep learning.